Strasbourg Cathedral or the Cathedral of Our Lady of Strasbourg, also known as Strasbourg Minster, is a Roman Catholic cathedral in Strasbourg, Alsace, France. Although considerable parts of it are still in Romanesque architecture, it is widely considered to be among the finest examples of high, or late, Gothic architecture. Erwin von Steinbach is credited for major contributions from 1277 to his death in 1318. At 142 meters, it was the world's tallest building from 1647 to 1874, when it was surpassed by St. Nikolai's Church, Hamburg. Today it is the sixth tallest church in the world and the highest extant structure built entirely in the Middle Ages. Described by Victor Hugo as a gigantic and delicate marvel, and by Goethe as a sublimely towering, wide-spreading tree of God, the cathedral is visible far across the plains of Alsace and can be seen from as far off as the Vosges Mountains or the Black Forest on the other side of the Rhine. Sandstone from the Vosges used in construction gives the cathedral its characteristic pink hue. History. Previous buildings on the site of the Strasbourg Cathedral was used for several successive religious buildings, starting from the Argentoratum period up to the building that is there today. It is known that a cathedral was erected by the Bishop St. Arbogast of the Strasbourg diocese at the end of the 7th century, on the base of a temple dedicated to the Virgin Mary, but nothing remains of it today. Strasbourg's previous cathedral, of which remains dating back to the late 4th century or early 5th century were unearthed in 1948 and 1956, was situated at the site of the current Opermillgleis St. Opermillchen. In the 8th century, the first cathedral was replaced by a more important building that would be completed under the reign of Charlemagne. Bishop Remigius von Strasbourg wished to be buried in the crypt, according to his will dated 778. It was certainly in this building that the Oaths of Strasbourg were pronounced in 842. Excavations carried out recently reveal that this Carolingian cathedral had 3 naves and 3 apses. A poem described this cathedral decorated with gold and precious stones by the Bishop Ratho. The basilica caught fire on multiple occasions, in 873, 1002, and 1007. In 1015, Bishop Werner von Habsburg laid the first stone of a new cathedral on the ruins of the Carolingian basilica. He then constructed a cathedral in the Romanesque style of architecture. That cathedral burned to the ground in 1176 because at that time the naves were covered with a wooden framework. After that disaster, Bishop Heinrich von Hasenberg decided to construct a new cathedral, to be more beautiful than that of Basel, which was just being finished. Construction of the new cathedral began on the foundations of the preceding structure, and did not end until centuries later. Werner's cathedral's crypt, which had not burned, was kept and expanded westwards. Construction of the cathedral. The construction began with the choir in the north transept in a Romanesque style, reminiscent of and actually inspired by the imperial cathedrals in its monumentality and height. But in 1225, a team coming from Chartres revolutionized the construction by suggesting a Gothic architecture style. The parts of the nave that had already been begun in Romanesque style were torn down, and in order to find money to finish the nave, the chapter resorted to indulgences in 1253. The money was kept by the Angstrom Juve Notre-Dame, which also hired architects and stone workers. The influence of the Chartres masters was also felt in the sculptures and statues. The Pillar of Angels, a representation of the Last Judgment on a pillar in the southern transept, facing the astronomical clock, owes to their expressive style. Like the city of Strasbourg, the cathedral connects German and French cultural influences, while the eastern structures, for example the choir and south portal, still have very Romanesque features, with more emphasis placed on walls than on windows. Above all, the famous west front, decorated with thousands of figures, is a masterpiece of the Gothic era. The tower is one of the first to rely substantially on craftsmanship, with the final appearance being one with a high degree of linearity captured in stone. While previous 4-section adders were certainly drawn prior to construction, Strasbourg has one of the earliest 4-section adders whose construction is inconceivable without prior drawing. Strasbourg and Cologne Cathedral together represent some of the earliest uses of architectural drawing. The work of Professor Robert O. Bork of the University of Iowa suggests that the design of the Strasbourg four-section aid, while seeming almost random in its complexity, can be constructed using a series of rotated octagons. The North Tower, completed in 1439, was the world's tallest building from 1647 until 1874. The planned South Tower was never built, and as a result, with its characteristic asymmetrical form, the Strasbourg Cathedral is now the premier landmark of Alsace. One can see 30 kilometers from the observation level, which provides a view of the Rhine banks from the Vosges all the way to the Black Forest. The octagonal tower as it can be seen is the combined work of architects Ulrich Ensingen and Johannes H1/4 Ltz of Cologne. Ensingen worked on the cathedral from 1399 to 1419, and H1/4 Ltz from 1419 to 1439. In 1505, architect Jacob von Landshut and sculptor Hans von Aachen finished rebuilding the St. Lawrence portal outside the northern transept in a markedly post-Gothic, early Renaissance style. As with the other portals of the cathedral, most of the statues now to be seen in situ are copies, the originals having been moved to the Musée copyright E de la Euro unregistered trademark Angstrom Juve Notre Dame. Later history. In the late Middle Ages, the city of Strasbourg had managed to liberate itself from the domination of the bishop and to rise to the status of free imperial city. The outgoing 15th century was marked by the sermons of Johann Gala von Kaisersberg and by the emerging Protestant Reformation, represented in Strasbourg by figures such as John Calvin, Martin Bicker and Jacob Sturm von Stomach. In 1524, the city council assigned the cathedral to the Protestant faith, while the building suffered some damage from iconoclastic assaults. In 1539, the world's first documented Christmas tree was set up inside the Ma-1/4 Nster. After the annexation of the city by Louis XIV of France, on September 30, 1681, and a mass celebrated in the cathedral on October 23, 1681 in presence of the king and Prince Bishop Franz Egon of F1/4 Rustenburg, the cathedral was returned to the Catholics and its inside redesigned according to the Catholic liturgy of the Counter-Reformation. In 1682, the choir screen was broken out to expand the choir towards the nave. Remains of the choir screen are displayed in the Musée copyright E de la Euro unregistered trademark Angstrom Juve Notre Dame and in the cloisters. The main or high altar, a major work of early Renaissance sculpture, was also demolished that year. Fragments can be seen in the Musée copyright E de la Euro unregistered trademark Angstrom Juve Notre Dame. A round, Baroque sacristy of modest proportions was added northeast of the northern transept in 1744 by the city's chief architect Joseph Massel according to plans by Robert de Cotten. Between 1772 and 1778 architect Jean Lorengo surrounded the cathedral by a gallery in early Gothic revival style in order to reorganize the merchants' shops that used to settle around the building. In April 1794, the Enraga copyright S who ruled the city started planning to tear the spire down, on the grounds that it hurt the principle of equality. The tower was saved, however, when in May of the same year citizens of Strasbourg crowned it with a giant tin Phrygian cap of the kind the Enraga copyright S themselves wore. This artifact was later kept in the historical collections of the city until they were all destroyed in a massive fire in August 1870. During the siege of Strasbourg, the cathedral was hit by Prussian artillery and the metal cross on the spire was bent. The crossing dome's roof was pierced and it was subsequently reconstructed in a grander, Romanesque revival style by the Notre Dame workshop's longtime chief architect, Gustav Klotz. During World War II, Strasbourg's cathedral was seen as a symbol for both warring parties. Adolf Hitler, who visited it on June 28, 1940, intended to transform the church into a national sanctuary of the German people, or into a monument to the unknown soldier. On March 1, 1941, General Leclerc made the vow of Kfir, stating he would rest the weapons only when our beautiful colors fly again on Strasbourg's cathedral. During that same war, the stained glass was removed in 74 cases and stored in a salt mine near Heilbronn, Germany. After the war, it was returned to the cathedral by the Monuments, Fine Arts and Archives section of the United States military. The cathedral was hit by British and American bombs during air raids on Strasbourg's centre on August 11, 1944, which also heavily damaged the Palais Rohan and the St. Madeleine Church. In 1956, the Council of Europe donated the famous choir window by Maxim Grand, the Strasbourg Madonna. Repairs to ward damage were completed only in the early 1990s. In October 1988, when the city commemorating 2,000 years of foundation by Argenturatum, Pope John Paul II visited and celebrated Mass in the cathedral. This event was also an occasion to celebrate the Franco-Germany reconciliation. In 2000, an al-Qaeda plot to bomb the adjacent Christmas market was prevented by French and German police. Personalities: Johann Gala von Kaisersberg, preacher; Caspar Hedio, preacher; Johann Conrad Danha, priest; Philip Jacob Spener, preacher; Franz Xaver Richter, Kapellmeister; Ignaz Pluel, Kapellmeister. Burials: Konrad de Lichtenberg. Dimensions. The known dimensions of the building are as follows: total length, 112 am, total inside length, 103 am, exterior height of central nave, 40 am, inside height of central nave, 32 am, inside height of lateral naves, 19 am, inside height of narthex, 42 am, width between pillars of central nave, 16 am, height of crossing dome, 58 am, height of platform, 66 am, height of spire, 142 am, exterior width of west four-section 8. 51.5 am, diameter of west four-section 8 rose window, 13.6 am, furnishing. Protestant and Revolutionary iconoclasm, the war periods of 1681, 1870 and 1940 Euro 1944 as well as changes in taste and liturgy have taken a toll of some of Strasbourg Cathedral's most outstanding features such as the choir screen of 1252 and the successive high altars, but many treasures remain inside the building. Others, or fragments of them, being displayed in the Musée copyright E de la Euro unregistered trademark Angstrom Uva Notre Dame. The outstanding elements are, stained glass windows, mostly 14th century, some late 12th century and 13th century, some 20th century. Stained glass windows from the former Dominican church, destroyed in 1870, in the Chapel Saint Laurent and Chapel Saint Andrew copyright. Tombstone of Conrad de Lichtenberg in the Chapel Saint Jean-Baptiste, circa 1300. Facing it, monument to a canon by Nikolaus Gehet. Richly ornate baptismal font by Jost Dotzinger in the northern transept, 1443, richly ornate pulpit by Hans Hammer, northeast of the central nave, 1486, life-sized group of sculptures Christ on the Mount of Olives in the northern transept, facing the baptismal font, 1498. The cross towering above it is from 1825, suspended pipe organ on the north side of the central nave, choir pipe organ, north side of the choir, Joseph Merklin, 1878, crypt pipe organ, 1998, busts of apostles from the high altar of 1682 along the semicircular wall closing the choir, wood, 17th century, tapestries Life of Mary, Paris, 17th century, acquired by the cathedral's chapter in the 18th century, altars in the chapels. Large Baroque altar of 1698 and 1776 in the chapel Saint Laurent, astronomical clock. The cathedral's south transept houses an 18-meter astronomical clock, one of the largest in the world. Its first forerunner was the so-called Dreiecke paragraph Nixer of 1352-1354, located at the opposite wall from where today's clock is. Then starting in 1547 a new clock was built by Christian Herlin, and others, but the construction was interrupted when the cathedral was handed over to the Roman Catholic Church. Construction was resumed in 1571 by Conrad Daciopodius and the Hebrecht brothers, and this clock was astronomically much more involved. It also had paintings by the Swiss painter Tobias Stimmer. That clock functioned into the late 18th century and can be seen today in the Strasbourg Museum of Decorative Arts. The clock existing today originated in 1838 to 1843 and was built by Jean-Baptiste Schwilger copyright and Daciopodius clock case, and with roughly the same functions, but equipped with completely new mechanics. Schwilger copyright made a number of preliminary studies years before, such as a design of the computer's mechanism in 1816, and built a prototype in 1821. This mechanism, whose whereabouts are now unknown, could compute Easter following the complex Gregorian rule. The astronomical part is unusually accurate. It indicates leap years, equinoxes, and more astronomical data. Thus it was already much more a complex calculating machine than a clock. Often the complicated functioning of the Strasbourg clock made specialized mathematical knowledge necessary. The clock was able to determine the computers at a time when computers did not yet exist. Easter had been defined at the First Council of Nicaea in AD 325 as the Sunday that follows the 14th day of the moon that falls on March 21 or immediately after. Today tourists see only the sculpted figurines of this clock, but behind this ensemble there is a mechanism that engages and that represents one of the most beautiful curiosities of the cathedral. The animated characters launch into movement at different hours of the day. One angel sounds the bell while a second turns over an hourglass. Different characters, representing the ages of life, parade in front of death. On the last level are the apostles, passing in front of Christ. The clock shows much more than the official time. It also indicates solar time, the day of the week, the month, the year, the sign of the zodiac, the phase of the moon and the position of several planets. All these automatons are put into operation at 12:30 p.m. According to legend, the creator of this clock had his eyes gouged out afterward, to prevent him from reproducing it. Similar legends are told for other clocks, such as the astronomical clock in Prague. In the same room, there is a statue of a man resting his elbows on a balustrade. According to legend, this was a rival architect to the one who had built the Pillar of Angels, the architectural feat of the era, who contended that one single pillar could never support such a large vault, and he would wait to see the whole thing come crashing down. There are several models of the Strasbourg clock, usually with simplified functions. One is in the Sydney Powerhouse Museum. From 1858 until 1989, the clock was taken care of by the Ungara Company. This company was founded in 1858 by two brothers, Albert and Thar copyright Odor Ungara, who were Schwilger copyrighter's assistants and later in charge of the astronomical clock for 3 generations. Since 1989, the clock has been taken care of by Alfred Forlimel, and his son Ludovic, for the Strasbourg Cathedral. Mr. Forlimel had been employed by Ungara between 1955 and 1989. In popular culture, the 1976 film Monsieur Klein, set in France in 1942, takes place largely in Paris but in one sequence. In the middle of the film, the protagonist visits his father in Strasbourg. The cathedral can be seen out a window, and there is a brief shot inside the cathedral of the astronomical clock's figurines moving about and striking the hour. The Dutch progressive rock band Focus dedicated a theme to the cathedral in their 1974 album Hamburger Concerto. The 2013 US TV show 0 Hour on ABC utilizes the cathedral for numerous scenes, including the first episode, as well as the episode Winding, in which the astronomical clock is figured prominently. The cathedral and surrounding plaza figure prominently in the opening scene of the film Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. Legends. One legend says that the building rests on immense piles of oak sinking into the waters of an underground lake. A boat would roam around the lake, without anyone inside, though the noise of the oars could be heard nevertheless. According to the legend, the entry to the underground lake could be found in the cellar of a house just opposite the cathedral. It would have been walled up a few centuries ago. The legend of the wind blowing around the cathedral is as follows: in olden days, the devil flew over the ground, riding the wind. Thus he caught a glimpse of his portrait carved onto the cathedral, the tempter, courting the foolish virgins, in the guise of a seductive young man. It is true that his back opens up and toads and snakes come out of it, but none of the Norway girls notices that nor do many tourists for that matter. Very flattered and curious, the devil had the idea to enter to see whether there were other sculptures representing him on the inside of the cathedral. Taken captive inside the holy place, he could not come back out. The wind always waits in the square and still howls today from impatience on the places outside the cathedral. The devil, furious, makes air currents from the bottom of the church to the height of the Pillar of Angels. See also Camiselle House, Parable of the Ten Virgins, Sabina von Steinbach, St. Thea copyright Bout Church, Than Street George's Church, Czar copyright Lestot, St. Peter and St. Paul's Church, Wissenberg. References, Strasbourg Cathedral at Empores, A.B. Susan Bernstein, Goethe's Architectonic Bildung Buildings in Classical Weimar, the Johns Hopkins University Press, Strasbourg Cathedral hangs on, The Christian Science Monitor, October 13, 1991, Art, Francis 25, Time, April 2, 1945, The Woman Who Rode Away and Other Stories, D. H. Lawrence, Dieter Mell, Google Livre. Books.google.com February 6, 1924. Retrieved May 23, 2012. Prodige du Gigantske du Dar copyright Lycat. Treekurth.com A.B. Les Grandes Dates de la Euro unregistered trademark Histoire de la Cathe copyright Trail de Strasbourg, La Prise de Strasbourg 1681, Strasbourg Virgin, on the Cloisters database, Readable du More registered trademark Tarot, French, A.B. Kurtz, Michael J. America and the Return of Nazi Contraband. Cambridge University Press PPA 171 Euro 172 Strasbourg Cathedral and the French Revolution. Inbroveritas.net. Retrieved May 23, 2012. Recht, Roland. Fuessel, Georges. Klein, Jean-Pierre, Connor registered trademark to Strasbourg, 1988, ISBN 2-7032-0185-0. Nazi-Deutschland im Alsace, Fest, Joachim C. Hitler. Verlag Ullstein. PA 689. ISBN A0-15-600-2754-2. Le Serment de Kufra, Kurtz, Michael J. America and the Return of Nazi Contraband. Cambridge University Press. PA 132. Kurtz, Michael J. America and the Return of Nazi Contraband. Cambridge University Press. PA 164. Vatican Library, Discours du Pape Jean-Paul II à l'occasion du biennial copyright né de la Fondation de Strasbourg, France. Convicts Islamic Militants, CBS.com, Strasbourg Amar 1/4 NSTER, Archinform, International Architecture Database. du.archinform.net. Retrieved May 23, 2012. La Croix Mission du Transept Nord de la Cathe copyright Trail, the nave organ, the choir organ, French, the crypt organ, this section largely translated from Fr. Cathe copyright Trail Notre-Dame de Strasbourg Loge Astronomique, 1, and Astronomische, 2. Strasbourg Clock. Powhazemuseum.com. Retrieved May 23, 2012. Lucy, Joseph. Monsieur Klein. DVD release 2004, Home Vision Entertainment. Title 4, Chapter 12. External links, Cathe copyright Trail de Strasbourg, Angstrom Uwe Notre-Dame, Strasbourg Cathedral, Notre Dame Cathedral, historical sketch of the Cathedral of Strasbourg at Project Gutenberg.